What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Thoughtful Banter. I'm your host, Matthew, with my co host, Hussein.
Yes, sir.
Welcome.
Aha.
Haha. A lot of y'all thought, man, Hussein moving to
He
Texas
was
will,
done.
yeah, it would kill y'all. We gotta cover Maryland's finest. You know,
Aha.
we gotta cover Maryland's finest.
Luigi.
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 Luigi playing Assassin's Creed out here. Man, Hussein, like, just give me your thoughts, bro. I know you be on Twitter reading and doing the deep dives, bro. What you got for us?
Yeah. I don't know if I have anything special or anything that no one has heard. Basically, we're a little bit late, of course, because again, we were trying to settle into everything. But so basically, I mean, I'm just gonna recap the story real quick. United Healthcare CEO is in New York and gets shot. Dude is waiting outside of wherever he is. He's waiting outside, ready with his strap, and then he pulls up, and then he gets out of bike, and then basically rides the bike into Central Park, and is gone in the wind. At least until relatively recently, when the police allegedly have found say they've allegedly found the shooter. Um, this was like a huge reaction on social media, and you had very positive reactions. And by positive, I mean people literally celebrating the death of the guy, and then and then you also had people who were like, "This is crazy. No, like civilized or society or country should be like condoning this kind of stuff." And those were kind of the reactions on the spectrum. Um, I have my own takes on like where I fall in that spectrum. But I'm curious to hear what you have to say because you typically on these kind of issues have way more diverging opinion than I do.
I think it's just interesting to see society's reaction. I think it's vastly popular. The more popular opinion is, bro, no one cares about the CEO, man. People are celebrating his death, or at least celebrating Luigi killing him. That's just the God's honest truth. No, I haven't seen any condolences, man. People have just been like, "Yo, no condolences." And there's been a lot of the sentiment of people just saying, "Man, no condolences for this billionaire," right? A lot of points of class, being discussed. Like, man, no sympathies for this billionaire who not only is a billionaire but like makes his money off of not insuring people who are paying to be insured. um, I'm seeing a lot of Desi girls making videos like fall in love with Luigi because he looked great. He looked good in the kurta, bro. He
You
be
look
eating it
right.
up.
You look right.
He looked right in the kurta, bro. Luigi also is cute. I won't even lie, bro. His looks max to the max.
He's built too,
His
bro.
physique is insane. He is like his low percent body fat. He's got a chisel face, bro. Very symmetric. But anyways,
Look,
look
I'm
at
looking
me.
out some Timothy Chalamet vibes, low key.
Dude, no, he's honestly like way more attractive than Timothy Chalamet. Like Timothy did not know
You're
got
just
no
saying that.
bod.
Is.
Yes, yes, of
I'm
course.
not even talking about that. I'm talking about like the facial structure type B.
He
That's
he
what I
look he
mean.
look gingly. I actually know some guys who look like him. I'm not going to shout them out like that. A little too sus. But he looked pretty kingly. But anyways, there's a lot of people like it's really becoming discussion about of like it's really shows what time we are in America right now. I think it's very like people will look back at this in history and be like, man, at this point in time, people were really fed up with like the one percenters, you know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I saw Ben Shapiro, right, was paying on Luigi, and his followers were eating him up. And I don't think Ben Shapiro's it
Really?
was yeah. His followers are eating him up. He
Really?
was saying like, yeah, like this is disgusting. You can't do this, people. And his followers are not having it because they're like, dude. And like so, I think also like as the story has unfolded, right? I think for one, in America, there's this weird thing. I think we're a bit too obsessed with like murderers, you know. So in general, even if someone murders anybody, whether like even like serial killers who like have demembered women and children, they just get attention because I think our society has some sicknesses to it, like every society, right? But it's a murderer who murders someone who, let's say, even if they, I'm not saying they did, but let's say the CEO did deserve to go out the way he did. He's the, the guy wasn't someone who was making clean money in a lot of people's opinion, right? Like he was profiting, he was making money off of human loss. Um, I think I think it just shows like how people feel about where we are, and when people found out Luigi's motivation, that like his mom was insured by the company, and I forget what her illness was. I think she had some kind of neurological issue, and
Yeah,
she
it was
wasn't,
something neurological.
yeah, and she wasn't insured pain medication because every night he heard his mom like at 4 a.m., 2 a.m. screaming because of the pain that she was in, and the insurance company claimed it wasn't an emergency, to be insured the pain medications for what she was going through. It makes you have a little bit more empathy for the guy.
It's funny. So, everyone when this first came out, everyone was like, look at this working class hero. Like he just fed up with the system. He was downtrodden by the system. Like he was trodden on by the system so much. Like he just got sick of it. And everyone kind of like painted him as this like working class hero basically. And then as more and more details started coming out about like who he was allegedly, it's still alleged at this point, right? So it could be that he ends up not being the shooter, or at least he ends up um going free because his lawyer does a good job in court. But
Inshallah.
uh, but but then basically the person Luigi, the alleged shooter, comes out. He's actually from one of like the richest families in Maryland. Like his family has been in the commercial real estate business for generations, and has made so much money. Like he wasn't a poor guy. He did not come from a poor family. He went to a school in Baltimore, this prep school in Baltimore. It's like 40 grand a year to go to. Like this is not a college. A lot of his past like tweets and his past basically social media presence was like dug up, of course, and unearthed. And he basically had like a lot of like normie right wing, like slightly like right leaning, or even sometimes far right views. Like he was not this like communist or like working class guy. And so some of the jokes were like, of course, you guys shouldn't have been surprised that it wasn't a communist or it wasn't a leftist because he didn't start a book club. He actually did something. And so those are some of the jokes that were coming out
That's
and stuff
interesting.
like this.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting because, and it's funny also because you feel like there's a grain of truth in there too, right? Like
That's
all
it.
these communists, like self-proclaimed communists and stuff, that are always talking about revolution and violent, uprising. They just be starting book clubs and yapping on Twitter for real. Like that's all they really be. Like we're gonna start the revolution. Read my newsletter. Like,
Read my newsletter. Yeah. It makes you think.
um,
This is probably divergent, but it makes you think about how there's like structures of like politics. Like there's people form themselves into political factions, and like on the surface level, it looks like these factions oftentimes are just about policies. And for a lot of
mm,
people, I'm sure they are just about policies. But a lot of times, what political faction you're in shows more about your psychology. And it's like there are people who will be a part of a group not because of the policies in the group, but because the group enforces a certain behavior that they have or a way of thinking
mhm.
about life. It's funny because people see like Republicans will really act even if you don't believe in Republicans. Like there's just this notion that they're not scared of movement. That they
I
about that
mean, we
life,
saw
even if it's not
in
true
January
always.
too, right?
Right, right. And then there's this understanding that the Democratic side, bro, they yap a lot. They just do a lot of talking.
At least that's the vibe, at least at the very least, right?
Right, right.
And then I think it gets even worse on the left, like the far left side of the spectrum, because they yap about, like, a Democrat will just yap about, maintaining, for the most part, maintaining like the structure as it is, even though there are injustices or whatever. Like we're gonna work within the system to address these things. That's kind of like the Democratic, like the centrist Democrat viewpoint, whereas like the leftist is more like tends to be more like, again, not this is not like all encompassing, or the leftist slash communist, because they're kind of related usually, tend to be bring more of the let's burn it all down energy, but that's literally just like it's literally just like this.
Just
Right?
yeah.
um but anyways, basically what this seemed to bring to my attention is that, one, a lot of people, okay, so let me just tell you where I come down on it. I actually agree that I don't think this is a good thing. like it's not really a good thing that someone who you strongly disagree with, you're just waiting outside to cap them as they exit their hotel or whatever. Like that's a little crazy. And I actually do think that if you live in an ideal society, that stuff does not happen. Um, that's one thing. I also think that, not having having apathy towards the CEO, that's one thing. Like I don't really care that he died. I don't really care that he died. like if a CEO of any company died, like I'm chilling. Really, the only reason I'd have a stake in like that CEO dying versus another CEO dying is if I had some stock in the company or something,
Right.
right?
Or you
Like
knew
that's
them.
the only, or I knew them personally. But like I'm saying, like outside of like that personal connection, the only reason I'm caring is like, oh, the CEO of Apple, like Tim Cook, he dies. Oh, my Apple stock is probably gonna crash a little bit. Like that's probably like the extent,
Yeah.
the extent of my care, basically. So I don't think there's a problem with not caring. That's fine. You didn't know the guy, especially if you weren't even on the guy's insurance. Like, who cares,
Yeah.
right? You didn't have stock and a stake in his company. Like, who cares? No one really cares. That's fine. I think celebrating it is a little insane. I don't know. Maybe you disagree with me, but like at the end of the day, I think, and I think this what I'm talking about kind of trails into the next thing we're going to talk about, which is Syria. But we'll get there. Um, we also kind of have to realize the human element of this, or I feel like we have to recognize the human element of this. And at the very least, at the very least, this dude had kids and a family that no longer have him. Right? He was in charge or responsible for kids in a family that are deprived of him now because someone decided to be a vigilante murderer. Like that's just what it was. There are very few men alive on Earth whose death I will celebrate. Netanyahu's definitely one of them, but that's like, like, like,
Yes, sir.
besides that, I can't really think of any more alive today that I'd be like happy for.
Yeah.
Um,
It takes a special kind of evil to like be really pleased with someone's death. Like I think
yeah.
to us as Muslims, right? I think our both of our understandings, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like, you know, there's this general, like you said earlier, there's a general understanding that even if you don't like someone, they're your brother in humanity at some level, right? But then there's
Mhm.
also this understanding Islamically where at some point you have to hate evil. And I think a person can reach a certain line where you're obligated to hate them based on how much harm they are causing everyone else around them. I think Netanyahu
Mhm.
is a perfect example. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't care what happens to me by saying that. Like, he's literally committing genocide. He's a warlord, and he lies about
Mhm.
it every single time he opens his mouth. There's nothing good about this guy. Like, he's not. It's like even you could say like, and there's plenty. Like, I probably think every leader on earth has gradient levels of corruption in them. You can even make arguments for these leaders that like, hey, they're corrupt, but like part of leading is about being corrupt, but like at least if you cause more good than bad, there's some benefit. Like I'm willing to accept that
Yeah.
option, right?
And so I guess so. So one of the arguments that I've heard in regards to what you just said is like, okay, well, he does fall into that category because all X amount of people that have died from denied claims on their insurance because
Mm-hmm.
United Healthcare just wanted more money, for example. That's all on his like that's all in his head. That's blood on his hands too. Even though it's like way less, like it's way more convoluted. Like it's not directly dropping a bomb on someone, for
Right,
example.
right.
So that's like an argument I've heard in favor. But I think ultimately what I've come away from this most is that people don't really have a good understanding of how the healthcare system works in America, or what even an ideal healthcare system looks like. I think a lot of people, leftists especially, they have this idea that in the communist utopia or even in like a single payer scheme, single payer healthcare scheme or model, there would be just an abundance of healthcare available to whoever needs it. Um, but what they don't seem to understand is like the fundamental constraint of material and reality, which is that any system right, put in place that has finite inputs, meaning the drugs, the people that work, like except the hospitals, that the buildings that can be hospitals that house these places, all these things are finite inputs. It is impossible for a system with finite inputs to have infinite outputs. It's just physically impossible. We know this, right? And so people have this idea that like, oh, if healthcare was just like this, then everyone would be able to get what they need. Everyone would be able to get what they deserve. And that doesn't mean. And what I'm saying is that I'm not saying that you can't be critical of the American healthcare system. There are plenty of things that we could do to fix the system and make it better. But I am saying that I'm not taking your critique seriously if you just think that healthcare and everything that comes with that grows on trees, and that even in a universal healthcare system, there wouldn't be people who maybe need something not being able to get it because again, the resources that we have to give from are limited, are finite. I don't think people understand how much doctors and hospitals play a part in healthcare costs being so high. This healthcare company, they came out and said the headline of this article said insurance company will only cover 1 hour of anesthesia for your surgery. That's what the headline was. What the actual truth was that, hey, anesthesiologists, your guys' rates for your work is ridiculously high. So for the sake, like I'm just gonna give you a hypothetical. You guys anesthesiologists, you guys charge $600 an hour of your work for your work, right? I'm not saying that's what it actually is, just to be clear. Um, and so the insurance company said we're gonna pay $600 an hour for 1 hour of a surgery, and then after that you're gonna get paid the Medicare rate, which is significantly lower. And then the anesthesiologist propaganda machine basically churned out all this misinformation and headlines with articles like insurance is only going to pay for 1 hour of your anesthesiology, and basically had so much public support and momentum behind them because people just had a fundamental misunderstanding of what was actually happening that they got that decision reversed. But that actually keeps healthcare costs high. Right? And that has nothing to do with the insurance company.
Right.
Right? The insurance company is it's not like, hey, I'm gonna, the insurance company can't, say, hey, you can only give this guy anesthesia for an hour, and then after that, he just has to have the surgery in pain. Like that's just not a thing they can do.
Right.
Right? But they can say, hey, you provider who charges $600 an hour, after this first hour, instead of paying you 600, I'm gonna pay you 300.
Right.
Right? Which is still a good rate.
Yeah.
Which is still a really good rate.
Yeah.
And the people who pushed for this not to happen were not the insurance companies, but rather they were the providers who are also keeping costs high.
Mm. Mm.
Right? So I don't think, and then you get into questions of like, okay, well, should an insurance company be able to tell a doctor what they should prescribe to their patient?
Mm.
Like this is kind of like the counter argument that gets set. And on the one hand, like when you just first hear that, your intuitive response is like no. Right? You're like, no, like if a doctor knows this patient, XYZ, yada yada yada, they probably shouldn't be able to interfere. An insurance company, like an outside third party, shouldn't be able to interfere with how this doctor cares for his patient, right? And what they recommend their patient get. But then again, you come into the issue of like constrained resources, right? So if there's X amount of this drug or X amount of this medical device that exists in the world or that we have access to or this insurance company has access to and can pay for. If a doctor recommends that for their patient, but say the patient doesn't actually like they could get something that was less expensive and it would satisfy all the needs for them. But the doctor recommends them the best thing that also happens to be the most expensive thing. If that resource is limited, it actually makes sense for the health insurer to say, "Hey, wait, prove to me that this person actually needs the most expensive thing." not necessarily because I want to make more money and I don't want to spend money on the chair.
Right.
And you can get into like medical devices and all the kind of stuff later. But this thing is we have a limited supply of these things. We want to make sure that the people who get them actually need them.
Right.
Um, and you know, I'm sure someone's gonna say like you're assuming that all these insurance companies are acting in great faith. I'm not. I don't think that. I don't think that all these insurance companies are always acting in good faith. But I do think that this issue is like significantly more complicated than people actually want to give it credit for being.
So I hear you, but I also don't hear you. But I will say, I don't know enough about how insurance actually works to retort, like to actually respond to like your point.
Mm.
I'll take your word for it. But I will say, I've been covered by amazing insurance before, and then I've had my own insurance from being an adult and having to get off my parents because I'm married and
Oh,
can't get my gotta be an
well,
adult, yada
technically,
yada
you don't
yada. Well, no,
have to
to
get
get
off
my
till
wife
next.
insured.
Yeah,
Um,
okay, okay.
so there is a difference between good insurance and bad insurance. And as someone who's been on great insurance, who's never had a problem, I feel like I can say with confidence that to an extent, none of this like there there are things that just aren't necessary. Um, I don't have
For
any
sure.
issues
For
with
sure.
like insurance cost. Like, yes, there are sometimes limited supply of things, but my issue is specifically the circumstance of when insurance starts telling people what's an emergency or not. Especially like with issues like woman care, for example. Like if like a woman might go to her OBGYN for something, and insurance be like, dog, that's not an emergency. It's like some AI or some guy looking at this visit and saying, oh, we're not going to pay for that. And it's like not because they don't have resources. They have all the money for it. They're trying to save money. That's their bottom line, which I understand because people are paying insurance really like on like a monthly rate, right? It's coming out their paycheck. So the only way for that business model to make money is for people to not really go to the doctor or to go to the doctor as limited as infrequently as possible. Um, that's my problem with insurance. But going back to is this wrong or right? Like, should we be happy? I don't think we should be happy that the assassination happened. Um, I really like. I'll be honest. Like, I'm a bit apathetic towards the person himself. I probably shouldn't be, but I'm kind of just like, oh, like
Pathetic too. I
I
don't
don't.
care.
Yeah, I don't care. Why
Like
should
personally
I?
about the
Yeah,
dude, like I don't care.
yeah, and like obviously part of that is the fact that like how he made his money. Like again, like you could be. I don't think one point of contention of having people online is like I keep hearing this thing where it's like it's impossible to be an ethical billionaire, and to me like that's such an arrogant statement because it's coming from people who make no money. Like like
Well,
like
well,
y'all
well.
making
Also,
45,000 a year. Shut up. Like like not to be like a hardcore Republican, but there is a possibility of someone creating a business model that's generating so much wealth and value for people that they think they can be valued at $1 billion. First of all, it doesn't mean they have $1 billion. No one is liquid a
in the
billion dollars, right? So it's like
future, yeah.
people are literally
Well, no,
stupid.
no
No
one's
one no
no
one
one's
has a
liquid.
billion dollars,
One, because it's incredibly stupid,
right?
right? Like all these banks are FDI insured up to $250,000.
Right. There's nothing.
Why would someone who has $1 billion liquid leave that sitting in a bank
Right.
account? Number one.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Right.
Like that
Right.
doesn't make any sense. Even the bank would be like, "Hey, dog, get this out of here."
There's too much cash, bro. Get us out. Burn it. Burn it. We gotta erase it for the system. Nah, this was never here. It's stupid.
Uh, but to your point, but to your broader point, like to your broader point, I actually agree. But I think a lot of that there can never be an ethical billionaire comes from people who subscribe to what's called the labor theory of value.
Oh, Marxist,
Uh,
basically. Yeah,
well, it's a Marx theory. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He
yeah.
like
He's
I guess
Marxist.
which is basically that you as a worker are entitled to your work and then also the excess that work is valued at. So say I'm Hussein and I employ Mahdi. I employ you. I pay you $25 an hour to make me a product that I sell for $1,500, right? So it's unethical because I'm only paying you $25 versus the and say the cost for the parts are another $25. So there's this product, right, that you're putting together, you're assembling, and that I'm buying the parts for. That all in all cost me $50, and then I'm selling that for 1,500 dollars,
Right.
um, right? And so the labor theory of value says, hey, you're actually being exploited, Mahdi, because you're not taking part in the profit that I'm making from the work that you put in.
Right.
So that's where I think that's where a lot of this like ethical
But
billionaire stuff is coming from, because it's coercive and yeah, because basically these billionaires employ people and then they profit off of their labor, and it's exploitative and coercive as a result. That's where a lot of that stuff comes from.
the main issue with this argument, the main issue with this argument is that people don't like. It's going back to the point of liquid, right? No one has like when people say this person's a billionaire, it's all of that. It's all based off of perceived value. So Sam Altman, from CEO of OpenAI, right? People say, oh, he's a billionaire, right, or a mega millionaire, because his company is valued at somewhat. His company has not turned a profit, but he is considered he has the status of the certain amount of money. His company has a turn a profit, but it's because he's such a massive shareholder of his company, and his company is valued at this that he's this. Does he have even $100 million in the bank? Maybe, but maybe not. I mean, once you get more than 25 million, are we even talking about real money? It's really like it's really perception. It's really like you could walk into a bank and someone looks up your name and they're like, okay, well, this guy might not have any
We
cash
can
on
give
him
you
right now. We'll give you $2 million of credit. Like it's a fake. That isn't to say we're not in a wage class issue right now, where there is still a huge wealth disparity, and that yes, of course, I believe someone should be obligated to like pay employees well. I mean, if it means anyone, thoughtful banter, we have very big splits here between the three employees. It's just they're making like 50, $70 a month. So it means anything to y'all. Like Asia, who's not even like she's not like me or her, she's not a founder. Like she get a fat cut. Now just to put that out, but I keep I keep getting distracted. So like back to the death. No, I think it is a sad thing. I'm not really sad that the CEO died. I don't really think he was a good person. I do think it is a sign of the degradation of our culture and of our society. And I think the elite need to wake up because people are really fed up with the class system. People really can't afford to live. Um, a lot of people feel like they can't afford to live, and
Yeah,
it's
a lot of
it,
people feel like they can afford to live. I agree.
yeah. But I think to be fair, like it's a scary time, especially with AI and technology. Um, yeah, people are just scared of not having jobs um and not having enough to feed their kids and family. And like insurance is one of those things where it's like, if you're having insurance problems, you're really having life problems. So I think the elite need to wake up. I don't know who the elite are. Don't ask me, but like, we need to think about the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last thing, just before we move on to the next subject, and I basically agree with you. I don't necessarily feel like a sorrow in my heart. Like I feel bad for the guy insofar as like I don't think this should have happened to him. In an ideal society, I don't think this kind of thing should happen. But like outside of that, I'm not really pressed about the dude. Like just being honest. Right? I'm not really pressed about the
I didn't know who he was until he
guy.
got shot, bro. I'm like, okay.
I didn't even know the dude existed. Literally, I didn't know the guy was alive until he got shot. Like I knew there was a CEO of this company. I didn't know who that dude was. So like I don't really have the capacity to care for him in that sense. Outside of the fact that it's like, it probably shouldn't have happened. Um and then actually I'm not gonna talk about the ethical billionaire point because we've already discussed it's kind of stupid. We can move on to the next topic. What else you got for me, Matt?
We're gonna talk about Syria. So Assad dipped. Assad said, I'm not having this. Like in the midst of man, like in the midst of Israel, Iran, Lebanon's war. It's not a conflict. It's a bloody war. Amidst this war that's happening right now.
War and
Um,
proxy war.
huh?
Yeah. Is it wars and proxy wars? Those like layers of war.
Yeah, amidst this war that's happening, like you know, the Syrian rebels just took over quick, um, kind of in a flash. And the reason I brought up Iran is because a lot of people know this, but Iran's been using Syria as where they transport their goods. Iran, like Syria, has basically been under like Hezbollah slash Iranian control for a good amount of time. Um, Iran was like supporting Assad's power there because he basically, was playing ball with Iran. But Iran's pretty stretched thin. Hezbollah is pretty stretched thin with Israel's attacks, and the rebels took that chance and basically overnight took over the government. Assad was not fighting them. Assad just dipped. He said, "Y'all can have it." Um, so yeah, a lot's happening there. It has potential. It has very large potential ramifications in the future. What are your thoughts, Hussein? What do you got for us?
um, I think people need to, again, I was talking about this earlier with the CEO. I think it's even more apt here. People need to, one, have a little bit of humility, and then two, also understand the human aspect of all of this, right? So you can have it's fine to have your political ideology, and it's fine for you to be on one side versus another. I can think you're wrong, or I can think you're stupid, but whatever, it is what it is. But when you let that cloud your understanding of circumstances and conflicts so much to the point where um you're not even able to acknowledge the suffering that these Syrians went through under Assad, is like that there's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for that. The Syrian people, God bless them, have been under years, decades of trauma. Um, and honestly, in this situation, it's kind of a situation where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. For Syria as a country, and there won't be peace. Unfortunately, I don't think there will be peace in Syria for a long time. That's not the way we want it. It's not the way it's ideal for it to be, but it's probably the reality of the situation. And so again, they were in a situation where it's either you have this bloody murderous dictator who is throwing people into concentration camps, basically like torture camps, prisons, and just murdering people, right? But at the same time, him along with his allies and the connections that he's made are enough of a deterrent for outside forces to come into the country, right? So like Israel, who's right at the border, is not really doing too much in Syria because he's Assad's there, Iran's there, Hezbollah's there, right? Like these people were deterrents. Whether you like them or you hate them, like there was a deterring factor that they had. Um, but I just think everyone who's like sitting on a high horse because they supported Hezbollah or supported Iran and is like actively like unable to acknowledge that some of these Syrian people who are actually living through these conditions and have family members who are in these prisons. Bro, there's video evidence of this stuff. Like people going into these hellholes where Assad kept people. They're all women's prisons, right? Filled with women, only women. And there are so many children, like young kids of these women that they had in prison, right? And they don't even know who the father is. Like this is not like like brother. Again, you can have your political ideology. You can think one thing was good for the country as a whole, maybe, whatever. But at the same time, you can't just ignore this reality. It's like when people like, you hear again communists talk about people like Fidel Castro and talk about people like Che Guevara, right? And they're like, bro, yeah, Western like communists. You're like, bro, we love them. They stood up to America, communism, 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 and it's like they've never had an interaction with an actual Cuban person ever, right? And so then they're like, oh well, like the Cubans here are the bourgeoisie that were able to get away, and that's why they hate Fidel because Fidel was taking away all their capital. And then you go a little bit further, and you actually go in country or you watch videos of people in country, and no one likes him. Like the poor people don't like him. And it's like you're over here from sitting from your ivory tower, like, yes, yes, Fidel was the master head of communism. And then everyone, and they talk, and like they're the people who love to talk about this lived reality, lived experience, all this kind of stuff. And yet, when it comes to the actual experience of people who lived through this guy's reign, right, and are facing the after effects of this guy's reign, no one likes him. Same thing here. Same thing with Syria.
This is very true. This is a sense, and to be honest, maybe I'll cut this out, but this is a sensitive point amongst Iranians and just Shias in general, because Iran's backing of Assad's regime. Um, the issue is what we have done. Whether people are flawed, right? But what has ended up happening is we have tied religion to politics. Now, there's an issue here because you really can't untie the two. The two are connected, right? But we've tied political figures as religious figures and as black or white. So we have a system now where it's like, okay, this country supports this and this country is good because they're Muslim and they're Shia, right? So it's just good. And we just turn a blind eye. And it's like you said, like you can say what you want. Maybe like you can even make the argument that there's still a net good. I'm not saying I believe this, but
From
you
Assad being there.
you can make an argument that, oh, there's a net good still of Assad being there, right? But either way, like you said, that doesn't change the fact that there's a prison filled with women and there's babies. Okay, these aren't all women who are victims of a miracle, who are objects of like who are of miracle, right? These babies came from somewhere, they don't know who the dad is. No one needs to spell it out any more than that. So it's clear abuse, and like that's systematic abuse. Like that's a prison. We're not talking about a woman in a neighborhood. We're talking about a prison. This is talking about thousands of women. Okay, and that's just one example. Now,
This is one example. Yeah, yeah.
and on the other hand, back to the other point, I don't like the fact that ISIS is now in control of Syria.
Yeah.
This
Again,
is
again, again.
right,
I think you can make a reasonable argument that it was better to have Assad there than not have him
right.
there. I would be willing to listen. I could. I don't know if I could be convinced necessarily, but like as long as you're like logically approaching it as far as like the outcome for the country, I could understand it, right? Especially if the alternative is like a Daesh like Al Qaeda offshoot, right? And then also simultaneously while all that's happening, Israel's taking your land, and then Turkey's also trying to take your land, right? Like so you have these two like powers encroaching on land that belongs to you. Again, I could hear that. At the same time, for me, it's like, um, these people honestly were in a bad position either way. One, either unfortunately the reality is they were in a bad position either way, and two, it's like this is the first victory, if you want to call it that. This is the first time they felt any joy at anything happening in this country for years. Who am I to deny them? Like, let them have their moment at the very least.
Right. It's like, and sorry, and I wasn't trying to skip that. I was just trying to say like to the point of like this is just an ugly situation. Like, us, honestly, like Assad seems like he was just a tyrannical ruler who did a lot of bad. Um, and it's like I'm not Syrian. I have no. My opinion doesn't matter, right? I mean, we're yapping because we're podcasters, you and I, right? It's easy for us to have an opinion, but I'm just wondering, like, what's the future going to be? I mean, as far as I understand it, ISIS at this point is confirmed just to be IDF, IDF undercover, right? Like they have ties to the IDF. Now, um, yeah, I don't know. Like this is a very turbulent time, and like Israel is already pushed. Speaking of Israel, Israel's already been pushing now. They're in the Syrian border. Um,
Yeah, I mean, did you hear Erdogan? Like, oh, parts of Syria are gonna become like, and he starts naming like cities in Turkey. Like him too.
yeah,
Him too.
it's the Middle East is a mess right now. Um, yeah, it makes me kind of think of like we have this conception that we're Muslim, um, and like that means anything. I'm not seeing a lot of Islam from Muslim countries. I think I'm seeing a lot of convenient Islam, a lot of politically driven Islam, like a lot of cherry picking. I'm not seeing a lot of I'm not seeing a lot of value based decision making from Muslim leaders. At the same time, again, I'm being a fence sitter right now. That's obviously not good. It's easier for me to say my comfy America life, but my politics like protecting me across the ocean. But I'm just saying it's like it's a mess, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's that's an argument I've heard for declare against declaring yourself some kind of bastion of religiosity of any faith, really, because it's like we live in this muddied world, and then sometimes you have to compromise here and compromise there, and who's to say what's the right compromise?
I don't
You
know.
know,
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Like, yeah. At the same time, I mean, and we've talked about this before. Like, what you're judged on is your process, right, in front of God. If your process, if you get the wrong output, right, because you have limited information, but your process was okay, process was solid, like that's what you're judged on.
Yeah,
Um,
and again, that's what we believe. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, like, and I mean, I'll be honest, like, I believe in that, but it's like, that might not necessarily be true. Like, inshallah, you know. I mean, the thing is
I
like,
mean,
no,
I
that's what we believe in.
I don't have a doubt, but what
It's
I will
not
say is
true.
perhaps there's maybe an outcome so bad that doesn't even matter if your process was good,
Right. Like
right?
exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like the process, bro. If my process was legit, we ended up nuking everyone. You gotta look at like, bro. But the equation don't make sense, bro. You also gotta look at like,
But also you have to look at like the counter, what they call like the counterfactual, which is like what would have happened if that didn't happen, right? So you know, uh, the U.S. bombs Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Um, they say, so, and this is not like I'm not making an Islamic argument for the U.S., but I'm just saying they say Japan would have kept the shogunate in place. Japan would have done that, and then a couple years later they would have been doing the same thing that they were doing
right.
before, right?
Like Japan was doing some
Um,
really bad stuff. To be fair.
and that is worse. That outcome is worse than us just nuking these two cities. Like that's like the you're engaging with the counterfactual there. But like the thing is, who knows if the counterfactual is actually true? Like that's
Yeah.
the hard part.
It's interesting too. It's like I think that's why religiously we don't necessarily do a counterfactual. My understanding, because it's all a bit arrogant. Like it's estimated guess. But like we don't. I don't know. Like I don't think religiously you can say, hey, if you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, would you? I don't know if you heard that like dilemma. You have a time machine. You go back in time and kill baby Hitler. It's like
I mean, I think there is some counterfactual reasoning that we use. Maybe not explicitly, but like Imam Hassan makes a treaty with Muawiyah instead of perpetually fighting with the dude. Why?
fair, fair, yeah,
Right?
fair,
Like
yeah,
you're at least you're assuming based on about what you know about Imam Hassan and his infallibility and his knowledge and et cetera, that he had come to some conclusion that this is better than that.
right,
Which is like everyone does it. We all do it.
right. But what if? But like, there's also situations where it's like, you know, Imam Ali knew who his killer would be. He had precognition of it, according to Shia narrations. And then people asked him like, "Yo, should we lock him up?" He was like, "No," and like he purposely went on his way to like treat him well beforehand, because it didn't happen. I guess is what I'm saying. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, life is complicated.
I mean, you could get into like you're potentially opening the door for like a way wilder, like longer religious conversation about like knowledge of the imams and like how that how that stuff kind of plays
Going
into
to
their
way over
actions.
my pay grade. I'm already over my
Basically,
pay grade. I'm gonna stop it there. Like Allahu Alam.
basically,
Allah knows I have no knowledge. But I'm just saying, it's just saying all this is interesting. I hope no
yeah.
one,
But
anyone listening
I
should
think
know that. Mhm. Sorry.
just to like round out the conversation, I just want to like basically hammer my point home, which is like again, you can think that one outcome is better than another. You can think that one party or movement is better is more righteous than another. I don't think we should be. I don't think we should be minimizing the. But I don't think we should be minimizing or ignoring or whatever you want to call it the like jubilation and excitement and genuine happiness that like the Syrian people, at least for the time being, are feeling at this moment as a result of their oppressor forcefully lift it, like being forced to lift his sword from their neck.
I agree, and I think the best case scenario possibly of this might be like, a lot of people were really concerned when Taliban took over Afghanistan officially. Um, you know, I have no knowledge, but for what I've seen, it's been surprisingly chill for
Like
considering
relative,
Taliban rule. Like
yeah,
people were expecting,
relative.
yeah, people were expecting, all right, bro, watch out, mass beheadings, and like, yeah, they've done like some Taliban stuff, obviously, like, hey, woman, get home, like, obviously, like, yeah, it's the Taliban, bro. They were good at. I don't know what you're expecting. Like, they're going to do something crazy, but like, I don't know. At that point, like, bro, let them have that thing, leaving your heads on the ground, bro. Like, they're Taliban rules. So it's like, and even like I've heard stuff like, the Shias there, like Hazaras have, historically been targeted um in Afghanistan. I've heard like, from our Afghan sources, like our friends basically. They're like, yeah, like family back home is surprisingly safe.
Mm.
They're like, hey yo man, get these women out of here and no education, bro, and no working. It's like, okay, like that might be what happens in Syria. If that happens, sounds like that won't be the worst possible outcome for the people. Um,
I mean, these
yeah,
HTS dudes are saying interesting things. I mean, I don't. Who knows if they're telling the truth or not? But at least on the face of it, they're saying a lot of the right things. They're saying stuff like, everyone, we're not going to establish an Islamic state. Everyone here is going to be considered a citizen, like a true rightful citizen. We're not going to discriminate based on religion. So Jew, Christian, Muslim, Shia, Sunni. They're keeping the supposedly, this is what they're saying. Who knows if it's true? But they're saying they're going to keep the shrine of Hazrat Zainab open for people to go visit. And I'm like, if all this is true, big if, big if. Um, but again, sometimes these things are not exactly we imagine playing out in different ways than they actually end up playing out. So I think if everyone could just take a step back, have some humility in addressing the situation, and acknowledge the real like human element that's happening here, I think I'd be a lot more content with some of the analysis that I've seen.
I agree with you, man. Actually, it's funny. I was at a Friday prayer, which I haven't been to in a minute, and the speaker, the Adam, actually made that point. Um, I think he spoke well on it, but there's a lot of people, man, who just speak about it and they're just glazing over, like, they're just pointing out, oh, look at this guy, he ISIS, bro. Oh, look at Israeli plan. I'm like, stop coping, brother. Like, take a moment. Like, yeah, man. To your point, I'm not sorry. I have nothing to add. I'm just making it longer, but yeah, man. Just need more humanity, bro. Like there's such little like we get so caught up in our like politics. There's no empathy. So you just see like you know it's so weird now with like technology too. Like we see people crying on videos, and it's like, are they faking it for IG? Oh, there's the makeup. It's like, is it a set? And like I get it. Like a lot of the world today feels a bit more fake too, because like there are things that can be fake with AI and stuff. But like I said, man, like there just needs to be more empathy in the Ummah.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it, and that's a good way to end. Inshallah, you guys
Undoubtedly.
have enjoyed this episode of Thoughtful Banter. I know it's been a little different. You're seeing us through the screens. Inshallah, you're still able to enjoy, and hopefully, you have funny and interesting and thoughtful critiques of any of the arguments that we put forward. And yeah, thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.
Take care, y'all.